Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to a brand new video. Now, the past few videos have been quite a bit of criticism and quite a bit of things that we would like to see change, or things that I think haven't been going the absolute best for Maplestory GMS. But in today's video, we're going to be going over exactly what I think is going to be in the brand new Inkwell note that we all are anticipating to be extremely soon. It's been quite a long time since the last Inkwell note. It's almost been exactly 4 months, so I thought it would be a perfect time to go over my thoughts, my predictions, and exactly what I think is going to be on this Inkwell note. Now, one thing that I do want to do in this video is I want to go over the past Inkwell notes and pretty much go over exactly what has changed since the beginning of the implementation of Inkwell notes. We've seen a lot of very good changes come into the game, but obviously there still needs to be quite a bit done for the game to be in an absolutely amazing spot. Now, don't get me wrong, Maplestory is in a great spot right now, but Maplestory GMS needs to do a better job of implementing some of these GMS exclusive updates. And I think if they do a few things correctly, that'll make the game absolutely perfect. So with that being said, let's jump right into the past Inkwell notes and kind of dissect and go over exactly what's been done and what's changed and what I think is going to be changing in this brand new Inkwell note. So obviously we got our initial first Inkwell note on April 16th, 2024. So almost a year and 4 months ago, which is absolutely insane to think about. And essentially in this first Inkwell note, we didn't really go over too many future changes that Inkwell and Team GMS wanted to make. They did, however, though, address that some of the changes from KMS were not going to be coming to GMS, and this is essentially what had started the entire Go West movement. I think the most notable thing in this Inkwell note was this bolded text right here, talking about the maximum amount of misos players can earn while hunting monsters is not going to be changed. The availability of cubes and how potentials obtained and adjusted are not going to be changed. The miso acquisition multiplier and crystal price is not going to be changed. And the availability of Ursa. So essentially all this initial Inkwell note was pretty much acknowledging the fact that GMS is its own entity and we are going to be doing things our way. So it was a great start to the Inkwell notes, but then fast forward to May 29th, 2024. And this was one of the first Inkwell notes where they really discussed the future of GMS and pretty much what they wanted to do. So let's kind of just go through this real quickly and talk about what they had discussed in this initial Inkwell note. So number one, they talked about trade restricted items, and this was a huge problem in regular server. So essentially what they did was they made fragments tradable, and they pretty much treated them just as nodes, as this was a pretty big issue in the community for GMS regular servers. And they took note and they had made these fragments tradable, which great change on them. They talked about what they wanted to do and they ended up doing it. So they continued throughout the rest of the note, and they talked about interactive server essentially not having the player base that they needed, so they offered a solution, which was the world merge. They announced this world merge for GMS Interactive, and well, essentially it's been done. They now have merged the worlds, and they announced exactly when it's going to be happening, which is essentially in 2 weeks from this video. So they talked about the problem, they addressed the solution, and now the solution is going into plan this month. They also talked about frenzy totems in this note and essentially the problem that frenzy totems can potentially cause and how they want to go about solving the frenzy totem issue. And well, lo and behold, they have solved the frenzy totem issue in interactive server. And the way that they went about solving the frenzy totem situation was by adding the brand new 90-day totem in interactive world. So again, nice change. They talked about the problem and then they addressed the solution and then they actually solved the problem. And then the Maple reward shop, they also added the new cubes and they added all the newer things in the interactive cash shop for the players to enjoy. And again, great. They addressed the problem and then they resolved the problem with a solution. And then they also just talked about a few things in Heroic World here. And then they talked about the upcoming updates for GMS exclusive, and this essentially started the entire Go West GMS exclusive events. And then in this note, the biggest thing that it had to do with Heroic server was the introduction of Grandest Familiars, which obviously this was an absolutely massive update for GMS Heroic, and it's a great step forward for the future of the game and the future of the server. And essentially they had added familiar drops to Cernium and Burnium in the Grandest area, which is great. Finally, a way for players to farm familiars without having to make a mule. So moving on from this Inkwell note, we go to September 24th, 2024. So essentially this was a follow-up note addressing the recent ways that they wanted to go about solving some of these problems, which they had done with the frenzy totems. So we can skip past that. We already know they had implemented the 90-day totems, which is great. And then this was the first time they actually went about addressing familiars in a different way. This is the first time that they actually had talked about mystical familiar cards and blue cards, and essentially that what they had done wasn't suffice. This really wasn't the best solution for the problem. They ended up increasing the monthly limit of blue cards from 1 to 3, which is about 700 on average to hit a 40% boss fam. So this obviously didn't really go over too well with Heroic players, because this isn't really a feasible solution for the problem. And then this is the note that they also addressed the field harvesting system, which they had then implemented in the game, and then as we know now has been revamped quite a bit. So it's actually a pretty good system right now. So hats off to GMS for this. This is actually a really good system, and it does help players from early game, mid game, and all the way to end game. And then essentially they just talked about the future direction of Team GMS and how they want to continue working on the problems in the game and continue to update the game accordingly outside of KMS, because the servers are so different. Move over to the next Inkwell note of February. This is pretty much like they're almost their 1-year anniversary into doing Inkwell notes, and essentially they had talked about all the things that they've done so far, such as the field harvesting system, the interactive world merge, which hasn't been done at this time but is being done currently in the present day, and then the chains of resentment and the blue cards that they have introduced. The chains of resentment I think is actually a pretty good solution to the problem, if I am seeing things correctly from GMS Reg. However, mystical cards, not that great of a solution, as we all know, and pretty much has been taken off the table as of right now. And then they close this Inkwell note off with talking about how they have big plans for this announcement in April for the 20th anniversary. And then go to the 20th anniversary, April 16th, and this is pretty much their biggest Inkwell note for, I would say, GMS Heroic as a whole. The Inkwell note itself didn't have that much information on it, but obviously, as we all know, they have the legendary 20th anniversary GMS exclusive kind of Inkwell video, which was absolutely amazing. They talked about future changes. They talked about the OSMS being introduced. They talked about adding familiar cards to all regions and a bunch of really cool things in the game. And then obviously we had talked about them revamping the auto harvest system, which was great. This was also the time where they had introduced the Steam Market, which I thought was absolutely amazing, but I did have my own concerns about the Steam Market, because I did look at it as something where they're probably going to lose a ton of money because of the way that it worked. I didn't really think that the scissors were valued in a way where they could still remain profitable. And obviously, as we all know today, the Steam Market has been closed down, and I get it if they're starting to lose money, and in GMS, NX is their only or biggest source of making money or generating revenue. If they start to lose a big chunk of that, obviously I understand that that is something that can't be in the game if it's going to lose them a majority of their revenue. So we'll see if they end up doing something different in the future with the Steam Market, but we'll have to wait and find out. But then obviously we all know, like I said before, the big bulk of this was OSMS and the familiar cards being in all regions. So now that we've gone over all the past notes, let's talk about what I think is going to be in the future Inkwell note. Now, in these past Inkwell notes over the past year and a half almost, we've seen them talk about various problems in the game. They talk about the GMS interactive problems, they've talked about the GMS heroic problems. A lot of the GMS interactive problems that they've talked about, they have now solved, such as the cash shop, the totems, the world merger, the tradability of fragments. And let me know if I'm forgetting anything in the comments down below, but I think that's about all that they've addressed in the interactive worlds. And then for reboot or heroic, pretty much all they've talked about or addressed for a problem at the moment is the familiars. And they did, however, talk about the star forcing system in this recent Inkwell note, which was essentially for both heroic and interactive servers, because it is a problem in both, since interactive doesn't have the player base that KMS does have. The point of the list, though, is to pretty much go and talk about the problems that have been addressed and the problems that have been solved. Most of the interactive problems have been solved, or they have had actions taken towards them, and most of the heroic problems have not yet been solved. I would say we only half solved the familiar problems, as farming 1 in 700 familiars to get a 40% boss fam, I don't really think it's a suffice solution to a problem, because that is essentially 2,100 hours just at the average. And obviously, as we all know, it's very easy to go 10 times over the average. So we haven't solved a ton of the problems in heroic, which in my opinion is where the majority of players are playing. We still have the lack of spares in heroic. We still have the shortened amount of EXP compared to every other server. We still have the lack of potential final damage to actually do this end game content because of the lack of spares that we have. And obviously the familiar system, not really the best right now either, but it obviously is a lot better than what it used to be. So what I think is going to be in the new Inkwell note, I do think they are going to address something with the familiars potentially. Maybe, we'll see. That might be a little bit high on the copium scale, but I do think there is some potential for them to address blue cards being added into the game for Miso. The other big thing that I think that they're going to be talking about is this star forcing system here. Now, whether or not they go and change the star forcing system as a whole, or they increase the spares that we get, I do not know. But I do, however, in fact, think that this is going to be something that they're going to address quite a bit in this new Inkwell note. And I think that's why it's been delayed so much. They know that the spare system is a problem in both GMS Heroic and GMS Interactive. And I think by talking about this, they knock out two birds with one stone, essentially. It's a problem in Interactive and it's a problem in Heroic, and obviously it does need to be addressed for the future of the game to function properly in GMS. So I think this is a huge thing that they're going to address, and I do think that this is going to be something that will be solved within the next few months here. The other thing that I think that they may talk about, but I think might be a little bit high on the copium scale, and I'm not entirely sure if it will be addressed, and that is going to be the EXP in GMS Heroic. Obviously, it is objectively the most difficult server to train on. That's just the facts of the situation right now. There is no other server that has a EXP rate as low as ours, so potentially that may be something that they address or they bring up to solve in the near future. And then I think the last thing that they will address in the Inkwell note essentially will be them going over and talking about the future of GMS events and how they're going to do a better job moving forward of listening to the community, having better feedback, and I think overall just implementing things in a smoother way, because I think they know that they screwed up a lot of these updates in the last few months, especially over the summertime with the implementation of SIA and all the downtime and all the emergency maintenances. Obviously, due to their last Maple memo, they know that they messed up, and I think that that's going to be something that they address. So yeah, to wrap things up, the majority of things that I think is going to be addressed in this brand new Inkwell note is going to be this star forcing system or spare gate system, whichever the one they deem fit, or whichever angle they go about it. I think this is going to be the majority of the Inkwell note in this. I would love to see them talk about blue cards, and I would love to see them talk about EXP acquisition in GMS Heroic. We'll see if they do talk about those changes. As for GMS Interactive, they've solved almost all the problems that the player base had with that server. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if there's any other problems that Interactive server has at the moment, but I'm pretty sure they've solved almost most of the problems that GMS Interactive had. So right now, it's mainly talking about GMS Heroic. I think that would be a pretty smart play on their part, especially since I would say 90% or 75 to 90% of the player base is playing in Heroic in the Western market. So we'll see what they do. I have high hopes. I have high expectations. I'm optimistic, and I think that they're going to do a good job in this next note. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be highly optimistic about this next note. I know other people, they may not be, but I think that you should. I think that they're going to be dropping a very, very big note with this following note, and I think it's going to make a lot of the player base happy. So we will see. We're going to have to wait and find out. Definitely going to be a note that drops before this next update come August 27th. So we will see. And fingers crossed until then, guys. But other than that, that is going to wrap up the video for today. Hope you guys did enjoy, and let us know in the comment section what you guys think is going to be in this brand new Inkwell note that we all hope is coming very, very soon.